FNCS week 1 is now over and there is so much to talk about. We had some of the biggest teams in the world get their FNCS ruined because of a game crash. 6 different lobbies crashed and so many teams missed out on qualifying for no reason, and Epic just hasn't acknowledged it, and FNCS is running like it never happened. We also have other huge teams like Moneymaker missing out of round 1. I want to talk about who's popping off. We have Clix and EpikWhale winning it all on NA, even beating out Peterbot and Poo after all of the hype. So there's a lot to talk about. Let's jump into it. A lot of you guys are still confused on how the FNCS format works. I'm not going to go through all of it, but basically we have 2 weeks of qualifiers. The top 250 best teams at the end of those 2 weeks go through to semifinals. So teams who struggled this week and didn't make it out of round 1 can still qualify for semifinals, but it's a lot harder. Meanwhile, teams like Clix and EpikWhale who have already popped off, they've basically secured their FNCS already. But with only 2 qualifying weeks, the stakes are high. So when there's completely game-breaking bugs, Epic needs to do something about it. If you guys somehow missed it, EU round 1, which is when we go from any team in Platinum Division down to top 2,000 teams, arguably the hardest round in FNCS. Going into the last game, we had about 6 different servers crash, kicking all of the players out when they needed these points. We had teams like Cami and Seti, Queasy and Thomas, and so many more, and they just never got their points. So if these teams needed that last game for points, that's it. They just didn't make it to the next round, and you'd think Epic would maybe rerun the tournament, maybe give them some points as something. No, Epic did nothing and didn't even address it. So a lot of these teams now have to pop off next week because of this. You might be thinking this has something to do with the DDoSing attack I talked about recently, where basically hackers were able to force crash servers and make them lag, but it doesn't look like it was that, but also I can't tell you it was that. So if that was what was leading to this, that's probably why Epic isn't acknowledging it, because they don't want people to know about it and they want to brush it under the rug, which I understand, but at the same time, this has affected so many teams and they're playing for potentially millions of dollars. This FNCS has hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line, and it qualifies you for a LAN that has $2 million. And some of these teams very well could win that LAN. You need to do something about it. Because it looks like Epic's not really going to do anything, I guess I'm just going to talk about FNCS as usual. So round 1 kicked off. It was super exciting. We'll kick off with NA. And if you're looking at this leaderboard, you might be a bit confused. Aussie, you said we're talking about NA. Why am I seeing Paco and Mixon on the top of the leaderboard? That's because Paco and Mixon have gone over to NA to compete for this FNCS. And yes, in their first round of the FNCS, they managed to win it all. They managed to ruin Peterbot and Poo's 5-win streak in the last tournaments. Peterbot and Poo were coming off the back of winning 5 cash cups in a row coming into this, and it looks like all it took to stop them was an EU team, and that sent a lot of people crazy. A lot of the NA fans were not happy about this. You can see that the Omzone Rise also outplaced Peterbot and Poo. A lot of people were saying Paco and Mixon were playing for placement. They only won opens because they were camping. They got a 3 elim win. That doesn't count. You know how it goes when it's EU versus NA. Either way, I was loving seeing an EU team come over and dominate on NA, but it did only last for the first round. Going into round number 2, we didn't see Paco and Mixon at the top, but they were doing really well across the leaderboard. Now, as far as notable teams that missed out on NA, there was no really massive pro teams as such. I'm saying pro teams because we were missing out on big content creating teams like Stable Ronaldo playing with Lays. Again, he was so close to qualifying, played phenomenally, and unfortunately had a really rough last game. So I think Ron is definitely good enough to make it to round 2. And like I mentioned, in this format, making it to round 1 is actually statistically the hardest round. You go from anyone in Platinum Division, which is hundreds of thousands of players, and you only get 2,000 teams going through. Then the next round goes from 2,000 to 1,000. That's half the team. So if you can make it to round 1, you have a really good shot of making it straight through to the finals if you play well. Over on EU, we did also have some major teams not make it through, most notably Moneymaker and Finay. And you probably wondered what happened to Moneymaker. He was everywhere, and then it seems like things have gone a little bit quiet. Moneymaker has been banned on Twitch. He hasn't exactly said why yet, but he is saying that he got banned for absolutely no reason, and he's trying to appeal to get it unbanned. If you're wondering why you haven't been seeing as much Moneymaker content, that's probably why. He is streaming over on YouTube, but this was a really unfortunate first round for someone that I feel like needs to start picking up the momentum again, because Moneymaker was everywhere last season. I think they can definitely do it next week. They are more than good enough to qualify out of FNCS. This team went to LAN, so we'll see if they can bring it back. We also had other big teams like Leshy and Swilliam, but for the most part, a lot of the big EU guys were able to make it through from the first couple rounds. Now, like I said, the format doesn't make round 2 really that exciting. It's top 2,000 down to 1,000. It doesn't really matter too much. Over on NA, EU wasn't able to keep up their dominance. I know it's an open round, but honestly, everyone was pretending like, you know, Mixon and Paco were now just going to run away and win every single tournament on NA. A lot of people started to say Peterbot and Poo will watch though. Cooper Canada won it. Peterbot and Poo, they've gone from winning everything to now not winning 2 tournaments. They won round 3. They brought it back. They showed their dominance. But round 4 is where things get spicy. This is the top 250 duos on the region. This is when lobbies get super stacked and we get to start to see how some of these teams are going to go against other grand finalist teams. Kicking off with EU, this is where we got our first chance to look at Mongraal and Savage. They've been playing in Cash Cups and they have not made a single finals this season. They haven't made an Eval Cup finals. They haven't made a Duo Cash Cup finals. And I was starting to get a little bit worried. I was so excited following Mongraal and Savage's storyline last season all the way up to Grands. Everyone was loving it. It really made competitive Fortnite feel like we were back in Chapter 1. But I was starting to get worried. But my worries were quickly put to rest. I say quickly, the first 3 games of finals, they died on spawn. They got a 44th, 42nd, and 46th. Now, they were going up against Pablo and Bevies, again, a very, very good team on EU, and they were also going up against Chap and Teeny. I talked about how both these teams are dropping at Mr. Savage and Mongraal's drop at the moment. It is that Joan drop that's over near the middle of the map they've been dropping at since this chapter started. Now, the problem with this drop spot is if you get contested and the fight drags out, you often get third party. So even though they actually racked up some elims on spawn in these fights, they didn't just get straight steamrolled. They weren't looking too hot. And as always, their Twitch chats were getting spammed with switch drops. This drop's terrible. Go somewhere else, drop a Grimgate, get the medallion, but they stuck to their game plan. They obviously had Blood X telling them that it's fine, it's going to be okay, and they brought it back. They got a 4th and a 5th in their next 2 games. Then they went on to get a 15th, a 45th, they died on spawn again, a 9th, and a 17th. Now, that 15th and 17th, I watched both these games. If they had just rotated a little bit early or maybe built 1 extra box or one of them got sniped in the back, these both could have so easily been top 5s. When they made endgame, they looked amazing. I am no longer worried about Mongraal and Savage making grand finals. Like I said, they're already straight into semifinals now. They came top 150, which is roughly the mark you need to come in the 4th round to guarantee semifinals. So they're already into semifinals no matter how they play next week. But I'm excited to see whether they can keep up this consistency because they looked like a different team. Compared to Cash Cups now FNCS, they were looking so much better. A team that was looking really shaky at the start of FNCS, Vco and Pink, where they both had to end stream in the earlier rounds because they looked like they weren't going to qualify. They absolutely dominated when the lobbies got more stacked. They closed it out on 390 points. They were first by over 50 points. Really putting on a solid performance and again, putting a lot of my fears at rest. I love this duo. Pink's been streaming everything. Vco is insanely mechanical. I want to see this team make grands and I started to get worried. They dominated when it mattered most. We also had Sky and Scroll, an extremely underrated team, in 2nd place. Same with CZB and Nathan. Volko and Vortexes, who actually broke the elim record in FNCS with 56 eliminations in round 1. Absolutely popping off. We had Karama and Werix and a bunch of other big teams. Now, you'll notice there are some big teams missing from that top 10 that you would expect. We actually had a really rough performance from Queasy and Thomas HD, as well as Malibuka and Mustache. As far as I can see, neither of them even placing inside that top 150, so they are going to have to perform next week as well to make sure they secured their semi-final spot. But a lot of the big teams were missing. Again, this isn't finishing in set lobbies like we're used to seeing, so we didn't get to see how these teams will go at it. Unfortunately, that means we don't get to see some of those big spawn fights as well, like over on NA. Everyone wanting to see how's Peterbot going to do, is Quanti going to get the edge on him. They don't really get in each other's lobbies that much. There's 5 lobbies running at a time. We don't really get to answer those kind of questions until we get to semifinals. NA round 4 did kick off as the story of Peterbot and Poo that we're used to seeing. They managed to get back-to-back 20 bomb wins in the finals, a 25 elim win and a 20 elim win, but they weren't able to find that consistency throughout the rest of the tournament. They started going down on spawn pretty much every game. They got a 21st where they made it to mid-game, and then a 41st, 36th, 50th, 30th, 23rd, 26th. You're seeing the pattern. They started struggling a little bit. Again, they're already in semifinals. They could just take next week off and it doesn't matter. So honestly, it didn't really matter too much how they performed for the rest of the tournament, but it did show that Peterbot and Poo, they can go down. They aren't gods. They can be beaten, but It's an opens lobby. We had a lot of teams dropping Grimgate who won't drop there in the finals. Booger and Ages, whose normal drop is Mount Olympus, they even were dropping a Grimgate to try to get the medallion to just get even more points and have a more fun game. So we won't really know how this storyline progresses until we see another set lobby. I will also mention as well, there's been a very major change, pretty much a secret update throughout the week to affect God Chest. God Chest now dropped 2 weapons, and this includes competitive, which makes the 50-50 so much more awkward. You might be thinking, oh, Epic's finally adjusting something with the new drops, they're going to affect it. This wasn't deliberate. Pubs now no longer have any of the old weapons like the wings and the lightning bolt and the Hades chain. They've been replaced with the avatar items, with the new collab. But those new collab items didn't make it into competitive. So they removed those items from the chests in competitive, but then just replaced them with regular guns. So when Peterbot lands first now, he opens the chest, he gets a DMR, but his opponent who lands gets the shotgun and beats him. You can see why the drop would now be more 50-50. I mention this because this is going to affect set lobbies. It's been like that for a few days now. It happened on the first day of FNCS, and Epic hasn't changed it. So I guess we're just going to run with this into semis and potentially grand finals, and that could be a big factor for upsetting this dominance that Peterbot and Poo have been having. Now, a team I'm extremely excited to see on the top of the leaderboard who are starting to get a little bit worried about, Clix and EpikWhale, winning it all on 394 points. Now, the reason why I'm starting to get worried is not because I think they're washed, it's not because their mechanics aren't there, it's because of their mentality. If you've been watching Clix's streams at all, you know that he has just not really been vibing with this season. I understand why. They nerfed the sniper and the auto shotgun, Clix's 2 favorite things. He doesn't like the new Cerberus shotgun. He's been doing a whole bunch with IRL content. You could just see his mindset wasn't quite there. I even actually reached out to him myself to have a chat with him, to try to get his head in the right spot, and he absolutely dominated this season. I don't think it has anything to do with what I talked to him about. I think he just saw FNCS and locked in and popped off. He started to embrace the game, started to kind of get into his groove, and they were looking insanely strong, and it was very fun to watch. As far as Mongraal and Savage back dominating, Clix and EpikWhale popping off, viewership is looking good, and the storylines are looking spicy coming into FNCS. They're doing it from Lavish Lair as well. This is not a mythic drop spot. They're not getting Grimgate medallion. They are just playing regular Fortnite, just like they're going to be able to play in the finals, and they're doing it really well. We had a lot of our other big teams on the leaderboard you'd expect. We had Skittles and Trashy out there, Acorn and Cold, who have not been grinding at all this season. Going into FNCS, I think Cold was not even level 30 yet, so they had not been playing at all. I was getting a little bit worried. They've already qualified for the LAN, so maybe they're just cruising through this FNCS. Nope, just like Clix and EpikWhale, as soon as FNCS starts, the dial turns up to 11, they lock in, and they pop off. Ages and Booger in 10th. Again, I'll follow the storyline of Paco and Mixon. They won opens. A lot of people said they were placement warriors. It's not that impressive. They came top 20 in the finals. They're looking good, and I'm very excited to see how this team does in the finals. If we have one of the 3 LAN spots for NA this season go to an EU team, people will not be happy, but I'm totally fine to get behind that storyline because it's going to be extremely entertaining. Now, I'm not going to go through and talk about every single placement. Like I said, if they came top 50 on the leaderboard, you can go check for yourself. They're probably already through into semifinals. The reason why it matters for next week, though, is the teams that get into the top 50 consistently, so they play good again, they get to go into the upper bracket of semifinals, and they're going to have an advantage. I don't want to overload you by confusing you with the format. I'll talk more about that as we get closer to semis, so we can just enjoy the gameplay. We do also have some huge content creators returning from Fortnite, so make sure you're following their storylines as well. 72 hours, yes, Liquid 72 hours is competing with Lazar P, 2 of the OG GOATs. Unknown Army has been back playing with Zexro. We had Cyphic PK throwing his hat in the ring into competitive again. He's playing with Noah W Plays. We have some huge content creating names playing in this, and next week is very much going to matter for them. So even if you look at a lot of your pro teams who've already got top 150, it doesn't matter anymore. There are some huge names to still cheer across the line.